She was unlike anyone I had ever known. Her name was Ligeia. She had an otherworldly beauty. Her eyes were deep and dark, like endless pools of ink. When she spoke, her voice was soft and haunting. It lingered in the air long after she was silent. I was captivated. I was obsessed. She became my everything. But Ligeia was not well. Her health was fragile. She often spoke of death and the mysteries beyond it. She believed in the power of the will. She thought one could conquer even death itself. I listened, but I did not understand. Not then. Her decline was slow and agonizing. I watched as the light in her eyes dimmed. Her voice grew faint. She clung to life with a fierceness that terrified me. Her will was unyielding, but even she could not escape the inevitable. The night she died, the air was heavy and suffocating. The room was dark, lit only by a single candle. Her breath was shallow. Her skin was pale. She reached for me, her hand cold and trembling. "Do not mourn me," she whispered. Her voice was barely audible. "I will return. I will not be gone forever." Her eyes closed. Her hand fell. She was gone. I was lost. Without her, the world felt empty and lifeless. I moved to a remote abbey. It was far from the memories that haunted me, but even there, I could not escape her. Her presence lingered like a shadow in my mind. I dreamed of her. Her eyes were dark. Her voice was soft. She called to me, her words echoing in the silence. I remarried, though my heart was not in it. My new wife, Rowena, was beautiful, but she was not Ligeia. Rowena was gentle and kind, but she could not fill the void Ligeia had left. I was distant and cold. Rowena tried to understand, but she could not. How could she? The abbey was old. Its halls were dark and silent. The air was thick with the scent of decay. Strange things began to happen. I heard whispers in the halls. I heard footsteps in empty rooms. The shadows seemed to move, twisting into grotesque shapes. I told myself it was my imagination, but I knew better. Rowena grew ill. Her health declined rapidly. She grew weak. She spoke of strange visions. A woman with dark eyes watched her from the shadows. I tried to comfort her, but her fear was palpable. She would wake in the night, screaming, her eyes wide with terror. "She's here," Rowena would whisper, trembling. "She's watching me." I did not believe her. Not then. One night, Rowena's condition worsened. She was pale. Her breath was shallow. I sat by her bedside, holding her hand. The room was dark, lit only by a single candle. The air was heavy, suffocating. I felt a presence, something ancient and malevolent. It watched me. It waited. Rowena's eyes fluttered open. She looked at me, her gaze piercing. "Do you see her?" she whispered. "She's here. She's come for me." I followed her gaze. The shadows in the corner of the room seemed to shift. I felt a chill. The air grew colder. The whispers grew louder. Rowena's hand tightened around mine. Her breath quickened. Her eyes widened with terror. "She's here," she gasped. "She's here." Her body convulsed. Her eyes rolled back. She was gone. I sat in silence, my heart pounding. The air was heavy, suffocating. The whispers grew louder. The shadows shifted. I felt a presence, something ancient. and malevolent. It watched me. It waited. I buried Rowena in the Abbey's crypt. The air was cold and damp. The walls were lined with ancient tombs. Their stones were cracked and broken. I felt a chill. The whispers grew louder. The footsteps grew closer. I felt a presence, something ancient and malevolent. It watched me. It waited. That night, I dreamed of Ligeia. She stood in the shadows, her eyes dark, her smile cruel. She reached for me, her fingers cold and lifeless. "I told you I would return," she whispered. "I am not gone, I am here." I woke in a cold sweat. The room was dark, lit only by a single candle. I felt a presence, something ancient and malevolent. It watched me. It waited. The whispers grew louder. The footsteps grew closer. The shadows shifted. One night I woke to a sound, a soft, rhythmic tapping. It came from the corner of the room. I sat up, my heart pounding. I lit a candle and stepped into the hall. I followed the sound to the crypt. The door was old, its wood splintered and cracked. I felt a presence, something ancient and malevolent. I opened the door and stepped inside. The air was cold and damp. The walls were lined with ancient tombs, their stones cracked and broken. I found Rowena's tomb. Its lid was cracked and splintered. I opened it. Inside was Rowena, her body pale and lifeless. Her eyes were closed. She looked just like the woman who had been visiting me. I reached out to touch her. Her skin was cold and lifeless. Her eyes opened. They were black, endless. She smiled, her lips curling into a faint grin. "Thank you," she said. Rowena stepped out of the tomb, her dress fluttering in the wind. She reached out to me, her fingers cold and lifeless. I tried to back away, but I could not move. She was in my mind, my soul. "You are mine," she said, "forever." The abbey stands on the edge of the moors. The windows are dark, like empty eyes. It feels wrong, alive, watching. I am with her now, forever.